I have always been aware of the impression I create when others observe me, a formidable presence, designed for the sport, exuding strength and authority on the court. I am Pierre Maro, the captain and leader, an unstoppable force standing over 2 meters tall, with broad shoulders and powerful arms capable of executing any dunk. My legs propel me through every sprint as if I were destined for this role. I relish the position of being at the pinnacle, the individual upon whom everyone relies when the game is on the line. The exhilaration of the crowd, the sound of sneakers squeaking against the polished wood, and the critical moment just before the buzzer, when everything rests in my hands, invigorate me. However, there is a misconception that accompanies my stature. People assume that, given my status, I must revel in the attention I receive from women. Indeed, I receive an abundance of messages filled with heart emojis, lingering glances, and flirtatious remarks that often lead to real-life invitations. After games, at parties, and even in class, they orbit around me as if I were a coveted prize. Yet, I am not interested in playing that game, and they remain unaware of my disinterest. My teammates, my coach, and the fans who come to watch me play are all oblivious. It is simpler this way, or at least it was until we lost a player mid-season. The coach acted swiftly to find a replacement, as we had a tournament approaching and could not afford to be short-handed. The newcomer was Miles Carter, a transfer student slightly shorter than I, leaner, with quick hands and keen eyes. He appeared to possess the potential of a good player, but once we took to the court, it became evident that he was extremely anxious. His passes were erratic, he hesitated on shots, and his defensive reads were poor. My frustration mounted with each missed opportunity. This was not merely a casual game, it was our season, and I refused to allow one player's lack of confidence to hinder our progress. As practice concluded and everyone began to leave, I lingered behind, observing Miles as he sat dejectedly on the bench, his gaze fixed on the floor. I recognized that expression, defeat and doubt from someone who already feels out of place. I sighed and ran a hand through my hair, reluctant to confront the situation. To assume the role of the antagonist is not my intention, yet I could not overlook the situation when the last member of the team exited to the showers. I approached and took a seat on the bench opposite him. "Do you have a moment?" I inquired. He looked up, surprised, and then nodded in agreement. The locker room had fallen silent, with only the faint sound of running water breaking the stillness. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, and observed him intently. "I understand," I began, my tone steady yet assertive. "New team, new system, and many eyes are on you. However, you must let that go. If you hesitate, you will falter. This game relies on instinct, not on second-guessing." He nodded in acknowledgement, but I could see doubt etched on his face. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't want to make mistakes." I let out a scoff. "You already are," I replied. His head snapped up, eyes wide with surprise. I smirked, shaking my head. "Not because you lack skill, but because you are playing with fear. I have seen your capabilities, you can excel if you stop holding back." He swallowed hard, nodding slowly, yet his body language remained tense. I should have concluded the conversation there. I should have offered him a reassuring pat on the shoulder, advised him to take a shower, and departed. However, I hesitated. During my speech, my gaze had wandered, his shirt was already off, revealing damp skin, his chest rising and falling with each breath. Suddenly, the locker room felt constricted, and a wave of heat surged up my spine, accompanied by a sharp twist in my stomach, an undeniable sensation I could not dismiss. I clenched my jaw, striving to regain my focus, but the realization had struck me. I had felt something inappropriate, and I was uncertain how much longer I could maintain the facade. The atmosphere in the locker room was thick, as if the heat from practice had not yet dissipated, and an invisible tension had settled between us, growing heavier with each passing moment of silence. The distant sound of the showers continued to echo, yet it did little to mask the rapid beating of my heart. Miles remained seated across from me, his hands loosely clasped between his knees, his head slightly bowed. He appeared to be reliving every error he had made during practice, every poor pass and every missed shot. I understood his feelings well. I had experienced the uncertainty of being the newcomer, questioning my own place within the team. I should have concentrated on that shared experience, on the importance of supporting him in his improvement and ensuring our team remained resilient. However, my thoughts had drifted away from basketball. Somewhere between my speech and his silence, a change occurred. Perhaps it was the way he finally exhaled, his shoulders easing slightly as if he were releasing the burden he had imposed on himself. Maybe it was the sheen of sweat still glistening on his skin, a single droplet trailing down his chest and vanishing beneath the waistband of his shorts. The fact that we were alone in the room, with only the two of us present, heightened my awareness of our proximity. My heart raced, and intrusive thoughts surged into my mind, thoughts I had spent my life trying to suppress. I clenched my fists against my knees, attempting to redirect my focus elsewhere, but it was futile. My body had already betrayed me. A warmth coiled in my stomach, and an ache settled deep within my chest. Then Miles looked up, and I recognized it in his expression. His lips parted slightly, as if he wished to speak but struggled to find the words. I noticed the way his breath caught and the flicker of uncertainty that was undeniably present. He felt it too. The realization struck me with such intensity that I acted without thinking or hesitating. I reached out, my fingers encircling his waist, gripping him before I could talk myself out of it. His skin was warm, and the muscles beneath my touch were firm. His breath hitched in surprise as he tensed, yet he did not pull away. If anything, he leaned in. That was all the encouragement I needed. I drew him closer, my lips meeting his, a surge of heat igniting within me. I had just crossed an irrevocable boundary, and I felt no remorse. His hands fumbled for stability, first clutching my arms and then gliding up to my shoulders, fingers entwining with the fabric of my shirt as he returned my kiss, not with hesitation or gentleness, but with an intensity that suggested he had been anticipating this moment as long as I had. A sharp intake of breath escaped him, the sound of our breaths intertwining, the pressure of his chest against mine igniting my senses. Each passing second heightened my awareness, my grip around his waist tightened, drawing him nearer, yearning for more, craving all of him. For the first time in my life, I was not preoccupied with what would follow. I was entirely lost in the moment. I cannot ascertain how long this lasted. It could have been mere seconds or perhaps hours. In that instant, time ceased to matter, overshadowed by the sensation of him, the taste of his breath, and the way our bodies fit together seamlessly. Eventually, we separated, our foreheads still touching, both of us breathless and astonished. His fingers remained entwined in the fabric of my jersey, as if he feared I would retreat too quickly, as if he was not ready for this to end. Neither was I, and that realization was the most daunting aspect, for I had initiated something I had no idea how to halt, and I was uncertain if I even wished to. The locker room remained deserted, the only sound being the distant hum of running showers and the gentle drip of water against the tiles. My breath was uneven, my body radiating warmth, my grip still secure around his waist. Miles had not shifted, nor had he pulled away. His fingers remained curled into my jersey, as if seeking something to anchor him. I swallowed hard, my heart racing, as I allowed my hands to glide lower, tracing the sculpted contours of his torso, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath my fingertips. He exhaled sharply, his breath brushing against my lips, his chest rising and falling in sync with mine. Yet, he did not stop me, his body was no longer tense. If anything, he leaned into me, his weight subtly shifting, his grip on me firm. My jersey tightened around me, but my thoughts were solely focused on him. I was oblivious to everything else as I reached up, my knuckles grazing his jawline, tracing the defined contour of his cheekbone. I observed the way his eyes deepened in color and how his lips parted slightly, as if he were anticipating my next move. I did not keep him waiting for long. I kissed him again, this time with a deliberate slowness and depth, unlike the earlier urgency. My hand slid to his lower back, pressing him firmly against me. His body felt solid against mine, the lean muscle beneath his skin tensing as his fingers first gripped my shoulders and then trailed down, his palms resting flat against my chest before moving lower. Every aspect of his touch was cautious yet willing, his initial hesitance giving way to a growing confidence, as if he were memorizing the sensation of my body beneath his hands and realizing how much he desired this connection as well. A sharp inhale escaped him, followed by a soft sigh, our breaths intertwining as his fingers dug into my skin, pulling him even closer. My pulse raced in my ears, warmth pooling low in my stomach as I felt him respond to every caress, every subtle shift, every deliberate movement. My hand glided up his sides, feeling the expansion of his ribs beneath my palms, and I sensed the slight shiver that coursed through him as my fingertips traced along his spine. His body fit against mine in a way that felt instinctive, almost predestined, as if we had shared this intimacy before. His lips parted under mine, a soft, unsteady breath escaping as I deepened the kiss, my fingers pressing into the small of his back to keep him close, unwilling to let go. I was not ready to stop, I was not ready to pull away. When his hands found my face, his fingertips gliding along my jawline before tangling in my hair, gripping just enough to drive me wild, I realized he felt the same urgency. The distant sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway outside, barely registering in my awareness. The muted sounds of our teammates returning from the showers should have served as a warning, a cue to pause and reflect. However, my mind was no longer functioning, not with him still pressed against me, his fingers gliding over my skin as if he were insatiable. I pulled back just enough to meet his gaze, his eyes were heavy-lidded, his lips swollen, and his breathing matched my own in its irregularity. It was then that the reality of our situation struck me. We were in the locker room, and anyone could enter at any moment. Miles seemed to sense it simultaneously, his body freezing, hands lowering slightly, breath hitching as the voices grew louder. For a brief moment, we remained motionless, still enveloped in the aftermath of our loss of control, dazed by what had just transpired. Then, as if breaking free from a spell, he stepped back, his chest rising and falling, fingers flexing uncertainly as if unsure of their purpose. I exhaled slowly, running a hand over my face, my heart racing, skin still aflame from his touch. I yearned to reach for him again, to draw him back, but the voices outside intensified, footsteps approaching, and I realized we were out of time. I glanced at him, observing as he raked a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply before giving me a look that was part panic, part something else entirely, something that resembled a desire for more. Without uttering another word, he grabbed his bag, turned, and slipped out of the locker room before anyone could spot him. I remained there for a long moment, my body still thrumming with adrenaline, fingers twitching as they recalled the sensation of his skin beneath them. I understood that this was not the end. The locker room faded from my awareness, yet I could still feel the heat, the weight of his body against mine, the way his hands had roamed my skin as if uncovering something new, something forbidden, something he hadn't realized he wanted until it was right before him. My pulse continued to race, and my skin still tingled. The descent was rapid, and I found myself uncertain of its nature. I was unaware of the truth behind it, its significance, or its destination. However, one thing was clear, I had no desire to halt this momentum. The intensity of his gaze suggested he felt the same. We remained silent, the atmosphere charged with unspoken words, the weight of recent events, and the unresolved tension that enveloped us. As we exited the locker room, re-entering a reality where we were merely teammates, I recognized that this was an issue I could no longer overlook, nor could he. The door closed behind us, isolating us from the outside world, leaving only the burden of our unvoiced thoughts. I felt an urgency that compelled me to act. I grasped his wrist, my fingers brushing against the warm skin just above his pulse, sensing its rapid beat beneath my touch. He looked at me, surprised, his lips slightly parted, breath quickened from our hasty exit, as if we were trying to conceal a secret from prying eyes. Yet, I had no intention of burying it or fleeing from it any longer. Before he could fully comprehend the situation, his back met the wall. My hands found their way to his sides, feeling the warmth radiating from him, the tautness of his muscles. He was undeniably real, alive, and the rhythm of his breath against mine sent a jolt of electricity through me. His hands rose to my shoulders, fingers digging in as if seeking stability, torn between the instinct to push me away or draw me nearer. He opted for the latter, and that was all the encouragement I needed. The kiss that followed was anything but cautious, it was a conflagration of desire and longing, a culmination of feelings that had been suppressed for far too long, too many days, too many practices, too many fleeting glances that we had both chosen to ignore. His lips collided with mine, igniting a fire that had been waiting to erupt.